Hello, Commissioner Scouten. We're just getting going. Okay, everybody all set? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 23rd, 2020 work session for the Washington County Board of Commissioners. We have here in the room with us Commissioner Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers, Commissioner Jerry Willey, and myself, Chair Catherine Harrington. And via Zoom, we have Commissioner Dick Scouten joining us as well. I guess they can see you on the monitors.
They can see him.
So, welcome, Commissioner Scouten. All right, the first item on the agenda is board and leadership communication. Commissioners, do you have anything you'd wish to share?
Of course. I'll start. I think I sent out a memo. I'm happy just to sign it as one commissioner. I still would like the idea of telling the governor that we'd like to decouple, or I would anyway. So it's nothing new. I explained that to everyone. I know the horse is kind of out of the barn on that and who we are together, but I think as time goes by, we may find that we need to do that. So
Could we come back to that particular
please.
item with the
Please.
COVID-19 update?
please, thank you. And as far as anything else, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Anything else?
Yeah, we're going to hear from our business group, so I won't say anything about that. This morning, and I got to get my notes out here, I forgot.
Will
This
that
morning-
be in work session or you mean tonight?
Right now. I think we're going to do that right now, but anyway, we'll get back to that. This morning, I attended the chamber board meeting, of course, on Zoom, and was happy to hear that, and I'm struggling with my notes now. I'm happy to hear that they are in the process of forming a Black Business Council to recruit more Black businesses into the city of Hillsborough and to Washington County. And that was at the suggestion by one of the Black business owners in Hillsborough, and has done some a little bit of research with some Portland Black businesses and wanting to know why they're not in Hillsborough and things like that. So the chamber is working with them to form this committee to encourage more Black businesses to come out into Washington County, and specifically, of course, into the Hillsborough area. And I think once they get it formed up, they may take that same footprint to the Beaverton Chamber and some of the other chambers, and to try and get that started. So kind of a positive note on how we can get more of our minority-owned businesses into Washington County.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Treese.
Just about to say good morning, and then I realized, nope, this is not good morning, it's good afternoon. I attended last week the King City State of the City address on Zoom, and Mayor Gibson did a great job there. I was really pleased to be a part of that. I also attended my first child care meeting. Can you hear me now? Okay. I attended my first child care meeting in relationship to the CARES funding yesterday, which was at the same time as the business recovery meeting. So I missed the business recovery meeting, but I really enjoyed the discussion. We've got great people working on that project. We've got a lot of things to learn before we move forward, but we've got a really good start there. And lastly, I did have a conversation today with Mitch Horniker. He called about the oversight committee. Actually, he called about the advisory committee first, about our participants there. This is in relationship to the wraparound services for homeless. And he also talked to us and encouraged us to be thinking hard about the oversight committee as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Scouten, how about you? Oh, we can't hear you yet. Sorry.
That was the best report ever.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Scouten, we're not able to hear you yet. No, I'm sorry. Is your computer muted? It's not, oh, it's not you. It's our computer on this side. The IT folks are working on it.
Commissioner Scouten, can you do a test? Thank you.
Darn, it worked previously.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Did I hear you, Commissioner Scouten?
All right. Can you hear me now? Oh,
Yes,
okay.
indeed. Yay.
Here I thought I was the one that was confused, but okay. Well, the only thing I have to say is I attended with a group of us virtually the AOC Section 8 meeting. And I thought that was very useful and worthwhile. And I was very encouraged to hear that our new executive director for the AOC has got a good mixture of urban, rural, and suburban life experiences. So I think she has a good feel for, for all of us in the different parts of the state. And I thought it was a very useful and fruitful discussion. We all agree we need AOC. We need to be respectful of the rural areas, obviously, and conversely, we need to have a certain amount of respect. And certainly, AOC should not be working against our interests. But there's plenty of things for us to be working on collectively. I think we all agreed. A lot of them have to do with unfunded mandates, among other things. That's it for me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Scouten, especially for hanging in there with our technical sound difficulties. I'd like to contribute a couple of things. We need to designate a member of this commission to participate in a meeting with the governor's office with Leah Horner each week. We all received an email directly from Gina Nickel from AOC back on June 16th, and then again from our AOC District 8 Chair, Jessica Vega Peterson, on, well, she sent it at least to me last Friday, and I forwarded it on to all of you. So we've been having these weekly AOC meetings on COVID on Fridays at 11 a.m. And they're now changing so that there's one designee per county for a more intimate conversation, because the Friday meetings, we have to send our questions in advance. And we hear from, the great speakers and get a lot of information out of it, but it's not a dialogue. So this meeting will be a dialogue. So who would like to participate? The meeting will be anywhere from a half an hour to an hour. I've heard both.
What time of the week would it be?
I have no date or time information.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to do that. Some like these spontaneous or these more spontaneous kind of discussions would be helpful.
Okay, great. Is that okay with everybody else? Okay, terrific. We'll make sure to get that in. I wanted to let you know I attended the AOC Legislative Committee meeting yesterday. Our government relations team's been doing a great job in tracking all the items. We've had that information through our email, and yesterday we approved the slate for public safety items as well as health and human services. And then in the board meeting, we approved funding for a new technical assistance program to help with various counties needing technical assistance for non-congregate shelters. So I've shared that information with all of you. Then this upcoming Monday, I will be participating in a BIPOC panel along with Commissioner from Marion County, Multnomah County, and myself from Washington County. This is a forum being set up by Representative Teresa de Leon. So I look forward to participating in that. Correct. Yep. I think particularly given our community demographics, but also in response to what we've learned about our historically disadvantaged community members through this COVID pandemic. So leadership communication.
I just have one item, the, excuse me, the listening circles that we had talked about previously. There's a session scheduled the week of July 6th, not on the 6th, it'll be later in the week. And these are for 2 board members to participate by listening. It's not participate in a discussion, it's created a safe space for people to comment on their issues. So the board should try to designate 2 members that we would then work with to get scheduled for that listening circle.
Oh, so you don't need all of us.
Right, I wasn't aware of that when I brought it up before. They say 2 board members would be good for that.
And this will be an evening item?
No, it'll be during the day sometime that week.
Will there be multiple opportunities or just the one?
This is the one that we're specifically saying the county leadership will be on. There are other listening circles that you could participate in just as a participant. But I apologize for not having all the detail, but we're still working that out with the contractor. But I wanted to get it on your radar screen now as we move forward with the scheduling. And once I have the dates, I was hoping to have them today, but I don't, I will get those to you, and you can see the different types of listening circles that are being put together.
Should we just wait until you send us an email and then commissioners that want to participate?
Okay.
get back to you?
Sure, that's good.
Okay, that's the week of the 7th, did you say?
The week of July 6th to 10.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will be on vacation for about 4 days on the coast.
It's virtual, so you could, if you had a connection, you could participate.
Defeats the whole purpose of being on
But
vacation.
then it wouldn't be vacation, yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I know.
I'll be on vacation that week too. So. I won't be here.
I'll get more information out to the board as soon as I get it.
Thank you.
All set? Mr. Rapplier?
Nothing here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Diane Taniguchi-Dennis?
Thank you. For the Clean Water Services budget hearing this evening, we'll have Tony Weller speaking to testify for CWAC and the Budget Committee. I think he's on Zoom, Mark, is that right? He'll be on Zoom.
Great. He was our very able chair of the Budget Committee, so thank you to him. All righty. Formal agenda items, I'll just note that we've had a few updates to our agenda for this evening. Item 6B, under Land Use and Transportation, we have an added link to the attachments. We have 2 items on the consent agenda under Support Services that weren't in the original published agenda. Item T, Award Contract for Conference Room Tables, and item U, Authorized Contract with MISO and agreements with cities within Washington County for economic stabilization. That is the extent of changes. Are there any questions with regard to tonight's agenda? Great. All righty, so next we'll move into item 2, the COVID-19 update with our very own Marnie Kyle, Director of Health and Human Services. Looks like also Tricia Mortel. And I can't really tell, there are so many people moving about in the room.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board. I think that John Southgate is also here to provide an update on the COVID Business Recovery Center, so we were going to let him go first real quick before Tricia and I.
Yeah, I
Is
think
that
that's going
okay?
to be a John and Alex tag team, and it's in regards to item U on our consent agenda.
Did we need an update, or?
Do you want an update or not? If you don't want an update, then we were prepared to provide that to the commission if there was any questions. If there's no questions about what we're doing here, then we can move on.
So we got the topic sheet updated properly so that it's
Yeah, yep.
clear the terms.
Pardon me? Contracts with MISO and cities within Washington County. No,
Well, there you go.
no. No, we've firmed up a number of things. We're moving ahead right now, and this is one of the things that's going to help us do that.
Okay, so originally I was double booked at 2 o'clock and that got canceled, but I'm sticking with the original plan, and I had asked Tricia to provide the afternoon update, and then I'll be with you this evening and do a PowerPoint that will be a lot of what you're going to hear this afternoon, but in a way that hopefully for the public also to get the
Feel
update.
free to stay at the table simply to listen, because I think we're going to have a little
Some
bit of
questions, yeah.
conversation.
Yep.
Great, so, good afternoon. I almost did good morning. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. So today's update, of course, always starts with where are we at, what's happening. Today was our highest case count ever, 42. We have had the 3 highest case counts in the last week. So that's concerning, but we'll talk a little bit more about the positives in addition to the concerns. So OHA's total confirmed case count today is 1,120. The positives, of course, are low hospitalization rates in Washington County and a low death rate. Still very grateful that we've only lost 20 lives here in our county. We did expect case count to go up. That, is what we knew would happen when we moved to this phase. And in particular, there's a multitude of things that are driving that. It's not just one thing. The first thing that we're doing is through our case investigation and contact tracing, we're encouraging more people to get tested. Previously, we asked them to stay home with mild symptoms. We said you don't need to seek testing, you don't need to see your doctor if you can take care of yourself. Right now, we're really pushing people to get testing. We also count in the positive counts those that we presume have COVID. So they're in the household, they have those symptoms, they haven't even been tested. So that's the first piece of why our rates are going up. The second is we are having more workplaces open. So we work and look at each work site, each congregate care site in terms of small clusters. And we have a great team. We have a strike team that jumps on it as fast as possible with an infection control, an environmental health specialist, and other staff to make sure that everyone, an employer, has the technical assistance they need to slow that down, to make sure we can contain it and we can get everyone that was a close contact into isolation and quarantine. So that's another difference. We are really moving people back into their homes to stay away from others to help them decrease the spread. But the third reason, of course, is social connections. People are anxious, they're getting back together, there's grads and dads, there's all kinds of family gatherings and friend gatherings. And we are mirroring what you're seeing in the rest of the state and the rest of the nation. Our highest percentage of cases are now in the age group 20 to 30, so 22%. The second highest is in the age group 30 to 40. So we need everyone to be thinking about those protective measures that we've been trying to practice and we need to keep practicing. And even with our families and friends. Previously, we thought about those who we didn't know, but those that we do know possibly have COVID as well. So we need everyone to wear face coverings, keep distance, and wash their hands often. And as we've learned with this disease, with this virus, we don't always know when we have it, when we first have it, and that's what's driving our numbers. So and when we look at our data, there are 6 conditions or criteria that OHA is watching in terms of where we're at. Last week, we met 3 of the 6. Again, that was low hospitalization rates, but we are seeing those upturn trends of case numbers and the percentage of people who are testing positive in terms of the whole test group. We are now, of course, tied to the regional metrics. So you're seeing the metrics, and that was a question here, not only for our own county, but for the region. We met 3 of 6, Clackamas met 4 of 6, and Multnomah met 2 of 6. So a reminder, though, that OHA and the governor look at this as a package. Each situation is not specifically going to hold us back. It really is the whole package. One of the things that we have been doing really, really very well, 100%, we get a gold star, making sure that we can talk to everyone who's tested positive within those 24 hours, and that's critical. So along with those low hospitalization rates, we really are getting to people quickly, and we're giving them the information they need to slow the spread, to stop having contact with others, and to get those who have been in contact with them into isolation and quarantine.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can,
So,
yeah.
Since we're all tied together now, what's the other 2 counties' percentages? Are they getting the gold star or not?
Clackamas County was not able to meet the case investigation rate. I think Multnomah did. Every one of our counties has a little different picture of what's going well and what's not going well. Chair Harrington and others heard some questions about special metrics, metrics around equity and diversity that Multnomah County had adopted, and whether that would be part of the criteria for the region. I spoke with OHA, and I was told that we would not be expected to meet the additional equity metrics specifically that Multnomah County adopted. However, there is an ongoing discussion at OHA about adding equity metrics into the future. And that's important exactly for what Chair Harrington mentioned. This disease rate is impacting communities of color at a higher rate than proportion than we would hope, and we know why. So we have been looking at our data and segmenting our data by race and ethnicity, and carefully thinking about how is our response happening for all community, but also communities most impacted. We gather what we call real D demographic data. So we drill down to as far as we can to determine what community a member or a case is a member of. That helps us to make a decision. One of the things that we are working on right now is pop-up community testing. You probably saw in the news that there was a Latinx couple that wanted to get tested. They were asymptomatic. They were wanting to travel and didn't want to infect anyone else. And even though the health criteria now says that they could get tested or should get tested because of the population that they come from, they were not able to do that. So we're, as part of our CARES funding and our response, doing pop-up testing for specific populations. The first one will be this weekend. It will be for a Pacific Islander community. And so we'll work with our community organizations to promote that, to staff that, and Virginia Garcia to do the testing and support of anyone who we find that is ill. We also, and Commissioner Willie was part of a conversation with the group that was working with migrant and seasonal agricultural workers. They are still meeting weekly. They're still looking at what we need to do. They're still testing. They're still supporting as much as we can. So it's really important that congregate care settings are a priority for us, long-term care facilities and migrant and seasonal worker. So We will probably see some of these metrics coming out in the future, but we're ready, we're prepared, we're doing the work, and we'll be there with our colleagues thinking about that. So what does the response look like on the ground right now? So since we've been in phase one, around 500 people are now in isolation and quarantine in Washington County. That number will grow. As you remember, people will need to stay home and stay away from others for a couple of weeks. So we're only a couple of weeks into this. That means we'll have more people than this at one time. We also do daily monitoring for those individuals, do calls to them, make sure they can take their temperature, they can check their symptoms, and they can get care if they become ill. Isolation and quarantine can't happen without resources and without support to those in need. And we knew that more people would be in need. People have lost their jobs. They've used their limited resources to be able to survive over this period. So just in the past week alone, we identified 35 families that needed some kind of isolation and support, quarantine support. And we refer them to our county CBOs. 70% of those were Spanish-speaking. And that was up from the week before. So in the past 2 weeks, 43 households are getting support. We have contracts in place with 13 nonprofits and community-based organizations to provide this isolation support and case management work. And it's approximately $995,000 that they are receiving to help us do this work into the future. So I think those are, there was another thing that came out today that you might be interested in, and it was the numbers of staff that each county has on the OHA report, and there was some confusion. The numbers that OHA reported were county staff, not OHA staff. We have been very successful in working with the Oregon Public Health Institute as our management and hiring group, and they have hired staff, 27 staff, and with 86% of them being bilingual, bicultural, to help us with this work. In addition, we have a total of 22 nurses doing case investigation and working with the businesses and others to make sure that we're doing our best work. So those are the things that I wanted to bring before you, and then see what questions you had today.
Thank you. This living with the virus continues to be a complex situation.
It does.
I know for me personally, my niece back in New Hampshire works as an LPN in a hospital. They've been getting tested every single day, and she just tested positive this weekend. So my family back there is doing the quarantine, isolation and quarantine business. So it made it real fast.
Yep.
When your family is some way touched.
Just to recap, if I may, just a quick, if I understood everything correctly, we're seeing a surge with the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds, and we're seeing more people get infected at work and family and friend gatherings. Is
Correct.
my understanding?
Correct. So there's not just one place. I think that's the big takeaway. There isn't just one outbreak in our community. There isn't just one single source. It is community-wide, and that's why we need that protection. As you know, tomorrow is the day that our county has been asked to require face coverings in public settings, and that was one extra protection to put in place for those who are experiencing these higher rates. It's weird because he's behind us.
Are we asking businesses to help us enforce the mandatory masking? How are we going to make that happen?
Yeah, we're supporting businesses in their desire and efforts to enforce. We do have a business enforcement team. There's some, we're holding up the sign that OHA has put out, but I think we had 55 calls last week from businesses and individuals. The first thing that we do is really reach out on phone or letter to say, are you aware of the guidelines? Are you following the guidelines? And if we get repeated problems or calls about that business, we actually go out. What has changed previously, public health was focused on the businesses that we inspect and license. At this point, executive order allows us to work with all businesses, so we will be working, and our environmental health team is the team that will be working with all business complaints going out into the future.
Okay, thank you.
And the information line where folks can share their concerns and complaints is available right on our COVID-19 coronavirus webpage, right on the county website.
Correct.
So it's available right then and there. So I was just holding up the signage that is available from the state OHA to help everyone know that there is face covering guidance. So I'm really pleased. That was something that they came out with after the governor's press conference. So I wanted to make sure that everyone here had the benefit of it. So I would really appreciate our having a conversation about the fact that we are currently linked as a region and what we're experiencing. You know, last week, I joined a couple of my colleagues in being, I think it was just last week, Tuesday, yes, in being very disappointed that our indicators were starting to go in the wrong direction. So it seemed like even though compared to our June 1st, we were trending towards that 21-day for applying for phase 2, but it sounds like our numbers are still concerning, so that we would not meet the requirements as an individual county to succeed in applying for phase 2.
Yeah, so the two metrics that would be most concerning are that increasing case rate, and we're trying to keep it under 5%. I think we're in the 20 range. Martini's probably got the numbers in her slideshow for you tonight. The other is how many cases can we link together? And we would like to have no less than 30% that we can't link, and we're at 65%. We're at double that. So that's why we're talking about community-wide spread, all of the different places where this is happening, and trying to, I guess, the governor said something like plead, cajole, encourage, support people to really think about what are you doing in those settings. I think we've been cautious in our public settings, but we're really losing the cautiousness in our private settings, in our connections with family and friends is most concerning right now.
Well, I'll say for myself, the reason why last week I wanted us to not be linked is that we as a county government are working very hard to support our community members. And I have noticed how we can give people the information and the empowerment, but it's really up to them. And so I'm still of the opinion that no matter what, people are going to do what they're going to do, whether or not we say we're in phase 1 or phase 2. So why don't we just get on with it? I am concerned a little bit about how our county colleagues throughout Oregon are able to advance into a phase without necessarily meeting the criteria. So it's like, if you're still going to let them go, and part of this is what I read in the media and also hear about through AOC meetings, that if there are other counties that are not meeting some of these criteria, then why are we being held back? And it almost feels like, well, I don't think anyone is intending to single us out per se. So do you have any thoughts there for us? I mean, I hesitate to posit that question to you because I stand firm that I want us to support our public health team and to make decisions that are public health informed and support public health. So I am not pressing you to change the data or in any way think I'm trying to take pains so you know that I don't disagree with your public health opinion. I'm just frustrated.
Yeah, I think we're all frustrated. I would appreciate, I would like to thank the board for trying to find that balance between the public health, data, science, and our economic recovery. It is a tough one. It is a very tough one this time around. It isn't as simple as some of our other public health emergencies and outbreaks. I agree with you that it feels inconsistent from county to county. Of course, the explanation from the governor's office is that the Tri-County area is linked with lots of venues, including work venues, but so are other counties. I think that we can look at this in another week with you and see how you're feeling. Right now, with the increasing rate, we're really hoping, public health is hoping to find that plateau. It would be hard to say that we are in a place where we should continue to open more things where people gather in larger amounts. That's the worry for me, not the venues themselves per se, but the amount of people and how are people acting in those venues. I think we can look at the data in the next week. I'm confident we can keep up our work in terms of case investigation in 24 hours. Hopeful we keep the hospitalization rates low, and then maybe we can turn the tide in terms of the percentage of increase in our cases and the percentage not connected. Marnie, do you want to say something else?
No, I think that that's right. I think we're as frustrated as you are. And it is that kind of double-edged sword of our numbers don't look good, so even if we weren't linked, I don't think Trish and I would sit in front of you and say, we're ready to move to phase 2. I don't think we're there, but I also, when we do feel confident that we're ready, we don't want to be held back because of a different county's situation. And I think that, yes, we have bigger population centers and more density, but I just think that they need to go on the criteria that they set forward and stick with it, and then it's clear, and we know what we're working towards, and it doesn't seem as random as it feels right now.
Well, I would like to pose a policy question to my colleagues, a question that I'm grappling with, and I would really benefit from hearing your thoughts. I've thought about where we are at this point in time, and it's clear to me that the governor isn't going to decouple us during this immediate process. But I also think about public policy for the longer term. And so I imagine, okay, hypothetically, 4 or 5 weeks, we're sailing along in phase 2. And then one of our 2 sister counties in the region has some kind of problem. And I want to make sure that we have the policy option to stay open in phase 2. And that we don't foreclose our opportunity to be open as a county because of one county community experience. It could be out in Sandy for all we know, right?
It could also be us.
Yes.
And even if it were us, I'd feel that we should be decoupled at that time as well. So, it's not just, what happens to us, but it's also what we can do to others. And I also have, based on the report that you just gave, I have more confidence in our numbers across all the measures moving forward than I have frankly, in Multnomah County.
My comments are pretty much the same. I mean, we all have gotten the emails. We understand that taking Multnomah County out of it, and I certainly I'm born and raised there, so I have some place in my heart for them. But 14 chambers of commerce in Clackamas and Washington County said this isn't fair, and a lot of businesses said this isn't fair. There's nothing I would take exception to support. Nothing, I take exception to what the chair said. It's just not what we're used to in America, where we all say, we have individual freedoms. So if we're not meeting the test, I'm all for us being locked down. That's our problem. But I don't think I want to be coupled with others, be responsible for what their actions or inactions are. And so I'm firmly for sending a letter to the governor in a very polite and nice way that said that we ought not to be coupled together. That's her call. She certainly can do that. She has the authority to do that. She can continue to do that. But I really believe, just like 29 other counties in this state, that we ought to be separate. And if we can make the grade and we can show that we're behaving in a proper way, that we ought to be given that chance. If we can't, then that's a different matter. But that's why I'm more than willing just to write my own letter. But I'd certainly like if everybody else would join and just in a polite, nice way say this is not the standard that we all are accustomed to, nor do we want to be living by.
Any thoughts, Commissioner Willie?
No new thoughts to that. I completely agree with what I've heard. I would certainly advocate that we at least send the letter to decouple.
Commissioner Scouten?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I agree with what I've heard. Thank you.
So let me make sure I heard this correctly. I don't usually send a letter about something that I don't think will change by virtue of the letter. So this is where I'm a little bit torn in speaking up about decoupling now versus decoupling out into the future. I could use your thoughts.
My ask would be different. It's a little bit different. Would I like to decouple now? Yes. I agree with this. We probably would not gain a lot of traction. But I'm hoping that if we can send a letter, the governor will be open to assessing as she goes forward that this doesn't have to be a couple. There'll be other metrics that she might use. I'm curious, as I say that, about the equity issues, because I'm not certain what that means. If we don't have the same equity numbers in certain populations, it's because, we have a large Asian and Hispanic population. In Multnomah County, when I grew up, and I said, there we had a large black population. So are we going to be held to a different standard for each of our populations? They are. Are we all going to be held to the same?
I think the metric would be more along the lines of what activities are we doing, what mitigation work are we doing versus what the actual disease rates are. I think that's where Multnomah County was at. They were looking at hospitalization rate differences, but they were also looking at how well are we providing certain sectors with PPE and other things like that. Commissioner Rogers, when we spoke to OHA when this first came to public health, we did make the same suggestion to OHA that perhaps the governor, even in her desire to make a linkage, could message that would be evaluated on an ongoing basis, because things do change and things will change, and even though we all are now linked to a July 10 date, that potentially could change as well.
I have another question, but I just add that if you're in rural Washington County, which Commissioner Willie represents a lot, I represent some too, their feelings are quite different as to what their incident rate is and how they are. So I suspect that Baker County and Wallowas and all through Lake County, they had a very different idea. I think Lake County hasn't even had an incident, so they don't understand any of the issue.
OHA, it's my understanding in talking with OHA that there was lots of modeling with the governor, and one of those was, should we look at the counties, particularly Washington and Clackamas, in terms of urban growth boundaries and density, and that was another thing that they talked about.
So, Madam Chair, if it were my brothers, I'd say we need to look at some resolution that would give us the option of, would give her the option of decoupling, so that we stand on our own. It's not fair, and I talked to some Clackamas, I see him at meetings, and he's saying, well, what do you deal with in Estacada and Malino and Molalla, and they've got the same issues. They're more rural than we are. Anyway, I'd encourage us to do something.
I would agree that we just need to go on record. I understand that this is not going, the governor's not going to go, oh, well, Washington County doesn't like this, so I better change my mind. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think we need to go on record early so that we can make the argument if we need to later.
Do we have any information as to whether or not Multnomah County is getting any pressure to decouple?
I do not know that.
I don't think so, but I thought I would ask the question.
No, I haven't heard of any either.
Well, when you're finishing last, there's no reason to argue about being first, so I guess that would be a good reason.
Elizabeth, can you help us get this letter set up? And she'll circulate that to make sure that the wording's okay. Commissioner Scout, was there anything else you wanted to add to this conversation about a letter?
No, I appreciate Commissioner Teresa's comment about it. This can work both ways, and I don't at the moment. I don't really have a lot of confidence in any of the counties right now. The numbers have been troubling, and I'm not seeing any really positive trends on a couple of the key indicators. Until that happens, there's an academic level to this discussion, but that doesn't actually change the sort of the rationale behind each one of us needs to stand on their own feet and not hold back others. And that would be true under this circumstance we are in now, or in a circumstance where one of the counties or two of the counties do much better than the third. And yeah, I mean, we may be the laggard. We don't know yet. I don't. There's no place for us to feel anything other than humble right now.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the conversation. I really, really benefited from the discussion, and I'm glad that we'll be moving forward on a clear letter from all of us.
I have another question
I do
for.
too.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I have another thing too. Go right
Okay.
ahead.
I was just going to ask about the situation report. My understanding it's going from a daily report to a weekly report. Is
Yes,
that,
yes.
and I assume that we'll be getting, if there's anything out of the norm throughout the week, we'll be getting a notification.
Yes, yes.
My question is that maybe you need to be a little clearer on the mask issue in businesses. I've read that executive order probably 10 times, just to be very certain. If you're seeing the public, there's no question. And that we understand that. But in office space specifically, where you can distance 6 feet, there is no mask requirement in that order.
Right.
As long as you can do that. If you wouldn't mind repeating that or saying that, because I think there's a lot of people, I've been getting that question, there's a lot of people who are saying, well, it's mandatory, I got to do it. And I said, not if you're not seeing the public and if you can do the 6 foot. You have a policy and a directive.
Marnie could bring that up tonight.
Right.
You know, the one thing I will say is, and I shared with you, I think maybe I did, we would really like to see some options for masking in situations where manufacturing and other places where it's safe and there's trouble distancing, because that is a concern of ours.
So you're agreeing that that's the interpretation?
No, that's not the interpretation. We've uplifted our conversation to the governor to say there are some instances in businesses that are non-public businesses where we think she should consider it for the safety of employees. Yes.
Additional.
Additional, yeah.
As long as you can socially
Yeah.
distance 6 feet,
Yeah.
you're not seeing the public in any way,
Yeah.
Yes,
the masking requirement is not there. So if somebody's sitting at a desk in an office, you
yes.
don't have to wear a mask all day because there's nobody in there with you.
Right. Exactly.
And we have that in place here for our employees.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And we're working on, the guidance for our employees.
So I have another item, still as part of the COVID-19 update. So when the governor made this announcement last Thursday, the idea came about that, well, okay, we're coupled. It would probably be in our interests to have a joint press event of some kind of the 3 counties to help the public understand or better understand how we are working together on this. And so our public information officers from the 3 counties have been working on the logistics of this and the timing of this. It's currently being planned for sometime the week of July 6th. I would be participating remotely. I'll be in my staycation. That's not a problem. But, you know, it could go out in time as well. We'll be better informed about what the numbers are, where we stand as a region, and so forth. So nothing is certain. Well, one thing is certain, and that is that each of our 3 counties would benefit from additional resources to help us as a community meet the needs of our community, public health, as well as economic recovery. So that for sure, we are taking a regional approach to lobby everywhere we can lobby, and to lobby every one of our elected delegations to achieve that. So there's a good, strong message there as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Stay tuned. More to come. Commissioner Schouten, any last things before we move on?
Thank you for asking. No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward to tonight. All right, we're a few minutes early, but if staff is ready, we'll move forward with agenda topic 3, ordinance on safe parking vehicle camping program. Does Commissioner Schouten have access to this information? Okay, so he.
I do.
Okay,
I do.
great, thank you.
Thank you. And Kathy, do we have our staff members, Andy, Teresa, and Ann Kelly? So before we jump into the safe parking, I did want to just remind you, we had sent a letter about support for the Metro Transportation Funding measure moving forward to the ballot, and with some specific comments. So I did hear from 2 of you that you were okay with the letter as it was written. Yeah, and so just wanted to weigh in if there were any other comments for us.
I have 2 letters. They look different and the words are different.
Okay. So the one in your left hand appears to be the one that we
So this is the
shared.
one that was in the packet, and this is the one that's been given at my table. So I don't know which we're acting on today, and we can figure that out later. So here at my table is the first time I'm seeing it.
We sent it on late Friday. So.
And
All right. Yeah.
letters can always be confusing.
I apologize for that. Yeah, and the other one is actually on the agenda, the consent agenda for the business meeting tonight to adopt letter of support, or the letter of commitment, I should say, for the Metro measure.
Yeah,
Similar,
they're
but
both dealing with the measure, and that's
Right.
why I thought they were the same letter.
okay, understandable. Okay. All right, so for safe parking, I'd like to introduce a few members of our team. I have, I think Andy Back hopefully is on, our Planning and Development Services Manager. Teresa Cherniak is our Principal Planner for Community Planning, and Ann Kelly is a Senior Planner. So I'm going to turn over to Ann and Teresa to run us through a presentation, and then we'll all be happy to answer some questions, and then we have a few specific questions for you as well. So go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ann, thank you.
Okay, great. And you can see me as well?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Stephen. I am going to give you just a briefing on our upcoming ordinance, a proposed provision that would allow vehicle camping for homeless persons. We've been coordinating recently with Housing and County Council on this a bit. And can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the ordinance, of course, would allow homeless people to live temporarily in their vehicles in certain land use districts, and it would be subject to a program designed to help them transition to stable housing. There's an existing program at the City of Beaverton, and they did in fact request that we move forward with this ordinance as part of the work program this year, and the board agreed to consider it. They are currently serving a number of sites, and there's one in unincorporated Washington County that is interested in also participating, and the Beaverton City program would like to extend its services to that site as well. So this ordinance would enable operation of the city's program in unincorporated Washington County, and it would also enable others, other public entities, to operate similar programs as long as they met certain program rules that we are proposing to adopt. Next slide, please. Thank you. So across the West Coast, as homelessness and housing issues worsen, a number of jurisdictions have adopted similar programs. Seattle, San Francisco, Portland, Eugene, here in Oregon, Benton County. They vary from what they allow in terms of accommodations, from vehicles to tents to other types of tiny homes and things. Some are just limited to religious institution sites, and others extend to a much wider array of property types, some including even residential properties. More recent programs respond to a court finding that we'll discuss in just a moment, and some actually respond to COVID-19 shelter-in-place and social distancing concerns. Benton County, the City of Vancouver, Washington, for example. The case that I just mentioned, it's a U.S. Supreme Court refusal to reconsider a lower court ruling against the City of Boise. A number of, or some homeless individuals had gotten together, and they opposed a city law that prohibited them from sleeping in public spaces outdoors. And the court ruling was that this city law violated the 8th Amendment, imposing cruel and unusual punishment on homeless individuals who had nowhere else to sleep. And we can move forward. So Oregon statute since 1999 has allowed local jurisdictions to allow religious institutions to offer space for homeless people to sleep overnight. The statute currently applies a 3-vehicle limit, and it requires sanitary facilities. It lets local jurisdictions add other limitations or conditions, but the statute itself is very brief. This year, though, we have seen draft legislation that didn't progress, the walkout, and then COVID things interfered with it, but we do expect it to come back, and it was looking to broaden allowances in terms of accommodation types and property types, and other emergency housing measures. We can move forward. Thank you. So more locally, Beaverton's program, it follows a test pilot program that Beaverton ran in cooperation with Just Compassion, a nonprofit. They tested this program on various sites in the city, and through that, they sort of honed the rules that they ultimately adopted. They now have a budget for 5 sites a year. Their adopted program rules are within city code, and which is one of the reasons we originally thought perhaps our program rules should go in Washington County Code. And their land use rules, citing provisions, setbacks, and that sort of thing, and allowances by district are in their development code. They do allow this use is exempt from permit requirements in all non-residential zones, and they do not limit it to religious institution sites only. They do require participation in their program, and they expanded beyond the ORS provisions using their home rule and police powers. We can move forward, please. Thank you. So what we're looking at now is proposing that the program rules, rather than being in the Washington County Code, be adopted just by resolution and order. And those would be related to program criteria. You know, we want to know that it's a program designed to successfully transition people into stable housing. We would like the housing department on board to help us ensure the program meets certain criteria. The program rules could say who would be allowed to run the program, cities in the county itself, perhaps other public entities, and potentially in concert with nonprofits. And it would also require sanitation facilities consistent with the ORS. Land use rules would be more of locational criteria for required facilities like sanitation and storage and that kind of thing, and where this use could be allowed. And we can move to the next slide. So this is a little bit more particular. We do also want to ensure that the program rules that we recommend for adoption in the resolution and order ensure that this happens at no cost to program participants, so that people who are camping and hoping to transition to more stable housing are not being charged for any services. We are looking at how to treat property owner violations. That's something that we still need to coordinate a bit further. We did just have a communication from the city of Beaverton, and they did say that they are not, they're not aware of any complaints regarding their development code provisions for this use, like setbacks and so forth. They have had some complaints, but they've been able to work them out with neighbors. So it sounds like it's going fairly well. And then CDC provisions, we would say, of course, that it's an exempt use, not requiring a development permit. This is primarily to save in time and cost for this critical use. We are looking to allow it on religious institution sites consistent with the ORS, as well as on other non-residential sites in non-residential districts. And we're looking to limit vehicles simply to whatever's consistent with Oregon Revised Statute. The statute may be revised based on what we've previously seen in draft to allow local jurisdictions to set their own limits. And so we'll be looking at that further to see how to craft something that would allow us perhaps to set our own limits. Again, just citing provisions like setbacks and so forth for the CDC, and we can move on. So we have landed on a few options. Option A would be for the county to allow this use right now on urban religious institution sites only, similar to what Benton County has done. Option B would be to allow it on those urban religious institution sites, as well as on other types of urban non-residential sites, as long as they're in non-residential districts. And we would limit those districts, for example, institutional or certain commercial districts. Option C would be most similar to Beaverton's provisions, allowing the use on all urban religious institution sites and on all non-residential districts when the use is not a residential use. So we will be looking to you for feedback on that. And I would just like to say that as the legislation is likely to move forward, we probably will be coming back and looking to broaden this further in the future. But we would like to see something get started that would allow Beaverton to extend its services to Washington County in the interim. And we can move on. Thank you. So we're looking to get the ordinance filed July 1st. And our current recommendation, again, is that the program rules be adopted into resolution and order. The CDC would include citing provisions and so forth, and both would take effect simultaneously, the resolution and order and the CDC allowances and provisions. And we would like to just kind of gauge your support on those options and hear any suggestions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to note too, Comey Calivor, my counterpart for Director of Housing Services, is here as well. So as Ann mentioned, we've been working with housing a little bit too on how we would envision implementing this, a program like this, or allowing a city to implement a program like this. So we're happy to answer any questions and take any feedback from you.
I have one comment, and I know the chair's going to slip back in the room here in a sec, so she'll take over from there. But this is my go slow conservative side. I like your option A to start with, and then we can always ratchet up as we go forward. That's just me, because I don't know what the unintended consequences might be to do other things, but that's that. But I have a question. On the policing of these sites, you always have to be concerned about drug use, prostitution, unruly behavior in any way. I like the idea. I think it's a great program. Who does that? Is that something that we've talked over with, especially the urban unincorporated, with the sheriff, that you pay special attention so that these folks are not only being provided a place to stay, but a safe place?
Right. So that becomes a part of the programmatic requirements. So in this case, the city of Beaverton established a program, and within their program are requirements for security measures, sanitation measures, and ensuring, again, that the program is focused on getting people into a more stable housing situation. It's really just a stopgap measure, get people some support, and hopefully get them transitioned into stable housing as quickly as possible. So this is always intended to be a temporary measure. So you have, the use may be ongoing, but the people that are taking advantage of the program or being helped by the program are there for a temporary period of time. We've talked a little bit about enforcement issues and concerns like that. So we think that, clearly having the support measures as a part of a program is critical. And then to the extent that there are other complaints, we have existing processes for noise, criminal issues, land use violations that we would be able to continue to work through. But I think the contractual arrangements, if you will, between the program sponsor and an operator, and then the participants in the program, are where a lot of that activity would be addressed. Yeah.
We also have a model obviously with the city of Beaverton where this is working well.
Correct.
And I think that I think we need to be supporting that model, and I think we need to be looking for opportunities to utilize this as to be able to help our homeless population, and as you say, to move them into a stable housing situation. So I'm very supportive of this, and I don't feel a need to move slowly. I would rather be certain that we're providing the services that we need to provide to get to the end result of the transition to stable housing.
So what I hear you proposing in terms of the question on the options is to move forward with option C, particularly given the responsibilities that it places on the program participants, the oversight, and all of that.
Yes, and I was trying to understand the difference between this letter, option A, B, and C, versus what you have on the screen. I think it's just a more condensed version on the screen.
Yes, yeah. So the idea is these sort of layer on top of each other. So A being the most conservative and limiting approach, C being the most broad applicability. And I wanted to say maybe two things to be clear. So at this time, the county does not have a program whereby we sponsor these types of facilities. We're putting this in place right now, at least, to accommodate a request by the city of Beaverton to expand its program to at least one urban unincorporated religious institution. And then it would create certainly the framework within which the county, if it did stand up a program, would have the ability to take advantage of the same provisions in the land use code and under the resolution and order. Yeah. And other cities for that matter too. If other cities chose to do this and wanted to have facilities that may potentially be right on the edge of a city, this would facilitate that too.
But this is specifically for unincorporated areas, so it's this has no influence if a city wants to do, like Hillsborough wants to do something different.
Right. That's correct, right.
Flexibility to do that. This is just unincorporated. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Scouten?
I heard from the course of Commissioner Treese's comments that, and I think I heard some affirmation that the City of Beaverton's program has been successful. How would you define success, or and if so, I would prefer to go. I would prefer to be a little more aggressive if it's correct that that program has been successful, especially in light of the fact that we'd be starting in a very limited way. Actually, we wouldn't be setting up our own programs, at least initially, from what I'm hearing.
I'll take a first cut, and then Ann or Teresa or Andy, feel free to weigh in. I think, our sense is that the city believes that the program has been successful in achieving the objective of helping, obviously, secure folks a safer place to temporarily stay and then make that transition into more stable housing. In terms of enforcement issues or concerns, it sounds like where the few that have arisen have been addressed successfully at this point, and I suspect that it sounds like from the city's perspective, most of that has occurred sort of in that relationship between the city, Just Compassion as the program manager, and then the participants in the program.
So in terms of proceeding with next steps, you asked if we had any questions.
Yes.
I'm not hearing any other questions.
Yeah, I would support, I think, the Beaverton program and that option. I do have one other question. On the one site that we're anticipating maybe working in cooperation with the City of Beaverton, would it be the same parameters in terms of Just Compassion would be running it and so forth? Or?
Yes, that's correct. It would be a part of the city's program using Just Compassion. So building on that model that we believe has proven to be successful so far.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would, Roy has voted for A, Pam has voted for C. I'll fill in the gaps. I prefer to do B myself. Again, not quite as small a baby steps as Commissioner Rogers indicated, but I'd like to test it a little bit before we jump into option C.
Well, I have to say that I reside in the city of Beaverton, and I've paid attention as a resident to their program and how it has been helpful for the community. And that's one of the reasons why I am supportive of option C. I think it is a model that works. Now, of course, you've got to have jurisdictional support, you've got to have program partner support. So just putting the code support, the language support in our code doesn't mean that something happens. All those other pieces have to be there. I think that was one of the questions that Commissioner Treese was inquiring about. So I think our moving forward with option C in order to put that infrastructure in place then allows for potential program sponsors to work within the program.
And I should say too, I think it's in the memo, but to be clear that the Beaverton approach is most similar to option C here, where they've essentially opened it up to both religious institution sites, but other non-residential sites throughout the the non-residential districts, yeah.
I found the spreadsheet or table very helpful.
Great, great.
One thing I'd like to point out here too is I've had some knowledge of this program based on the progression that Beaverton has made in dealing with their homeless issue. And I think part of it was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they were looking at alternatives to avoid street parking as well within the neighborhood. So this isn't just a program that's offered up. It was really a program that was designed in part to address what the neighborhood issues were. And I think by moving to option C, we allow ourselves the opportunity to potentially, at least be ahead of the game in avoiding those types of neighborhood camping situations that Beaverton face.
I might just add as well that by giving us this direction, we'll still take this through the hearing process. And so it'll come to the Planning Commission and back to the board. And so it'll have a fuller vetting. You'll hear from the public and possibly Beaverton and others. So this isn't making a final decision or anything. It's just giving us direction on what we might file and bring through the process.
My question is I understand you'll go through all that vetting process, but on site selection, will that be a process where the public can come in and weigh in? You could have something that would be in urban, unincorporated, be right on the border with the city and might provide them some issues. You could have neighborhoods who are totally opposed, and that's the unintended consequence. That's why I like to walk and understand what we're doing. I think people are sympathetic, and it's a good program. But are there going to be some sort of public hearings, or are we just going to say you can open this up and anybody can have one, or how does that work? After
I think that is a policy question probably that we would look to the board for some guidance on. So I think within the programmatic rules that you may adopt, you certainly could require some additional notification provision if that were something that you were interested in doing. But I don't think it would be mandatory.
Mr. Rogers, members of the board, just as it's proposed, it's an exempt use, so there's no land use hearing whatsoever. If there was any kind of notice or hearing, it'd have to be through some of the programmatic rules you put. But at least as the land use code that he's proposing, it is exempt use, and exempt uses don't provide any notice.
I won't beat it to death, but I just know what happens when we got the B&Bs and we heard all the folks saying, well, what's happening next door? Again, people are empathetic and sympathetic both to this situation, so I would hope that they would buy in, but giving them a voice at least in the process if one's being cited in their particular area is going to save a lot of maybe unhappy people at some point. So I'm just trying to set up a public process. Okay, I understand.
But you're asking a very good point. On page 2 of the memo that comes along with this, under the policy questions, and I'll give Stephen a moment to make sure he...
Yeah, I apologize, I inadvertently closed my browser. Okay. So go ahead, I'll catch up.
We have Teresa and Ann in the meeting, and Andy too. The last bullet, should the county treat potential program rule violations by site owners in the Washington County Code, WCCC, as civil infractions similar to Beaverton's treatment in city code? And so I assume that, yes, there would be some enforcement infraction case here. So, whenever you enable something, and certainly one thing that I understand from Beaverton's program experience, that their code allowed and enabled, but the other program prerequisites require, all these other requirements, requirements for program management of participant screening and so forth, having the volunteers to actually run the program, it pretty quickly filters things down. And so it isn't quite like, oh, all of a sudden, all kinds of neighborhoods allow B&Bs. There's so many other prerequisites that go into having a program. So I think it's this question that we're being asked today just helps us move one step closer towards putting the code together and going through the process and hearing all of that input, which could also give us more time to hear from Beaverton about their experience.
I'd like to add one last thing, or my perspective, one last thing, and that is that we had the public meetings. Do you remember the public meetings that we had on the homeless measure? That and we attended different ones. There was one at the Beaverton Library that was overflowing. There were so many people there, and at my table, I had a participant who actually had taken advantage of the safe parking process. And what I took away from his and his partner's discussion was that it was just a wonderful opportunity for them to transition, to get some feet on the ground in a safe environment, to be able to know where they were going to be at night and not be harassed, not be vulnerable to other forces, so to speak, as they were trying to move through the system. That made a big impact on me, hearing a firsthand story, if you will, about the use of the program. So that's also what I bring to, part of the passion that I bring to the discussion here today.
So I think, is there any sense of direction as to whether to? And then I was just asking, sort of to Commissioner Rogers' point of potential programmatic requirement for notice of any adjoining property owners if a particular site wants to participate in the program.
My strong encouragement that you do, and the reason that people like to feel that their neighborhood part in some state, exclude them, even though that might be, as Alan says in the law, I think you're ripe for issues. We all want to do the right thing. We want to put these in, and hopefully a lot of them. But I think if you don't include a voice up front, you're certainly going to hear it on the back end. Good thing to do.
And again, we don't have to make that decision today. Obviously, as we go through the process, we'll have opportunities to make modifications to the proposal as we go, so. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And before you leave the table,
Yes.
nothing more on that. I did have the opportunity, so I'm going back to the,
Yes.
oh, I missed it. Sorry, your coworker saying hello. I had the opportunity to look back at the Get Moving 2020 measure support letter.
Thank you.
And it turns out that I had read almost all of it online prior, last week when we received it. So I'm thumbs up on the letter. I think you heard thumbs up from everyone else as well. I was the last holdout.
Okay.
Is that correct, Commissioner Schouten? Were you thumbs up on that letter too? Yeah, okay. So
Okay.
it looks like you've got all 5 of us for signatures for delivery per the requested date.
Great. Thank you all. I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Thank you for giving me the time to catch up with myself. All righty, we're almost on schedule. Up the next item, item 4, is reimbursement district and local improvement district ordinance updates. This is a clean water services topic. And so we have both Andy Braun and Nora Curtis here, 2 of our great experts. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Am I on here? Okay, good. Good afternoon. I'll just briefly do an introduction. We're coming back to you. We came to you in last year, November of last year, and then in January of this year, with a suggestion and then your subsequent direction to modify our reimbursement district ordinance. The reimbursement district ordinance is one of 2 ordinances that we have that basically provide a way for financing for benefited properties to finance public improvements. So upon your direction in February, we've been working on the revisions to the reimbursement district ordinance. And as part of that, we recognize that there are some companion things that we would like to modify in the local improvement district ordinance. So today's presentation is really to update you on the proposed changes to the reimbursement district ordinance, what would be the proposed changes to the local improvement district ordinance should you direct us to do that, and give you a timeline for when we would come back for those actions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Nora. That was a good lead in and a good overview. Like Nora said, this is not your first introduction into the LID and reimbursement district ordinance. We talked with you about it in November and then a little bit in January. And it's also come up at a couple of the public hearings that we've had associated with projects. If you remember the Moss Street LID, there were some requests made that we really looked within the ordinance to see if we could accommodate the request. And also when we were talking about the reimbursement district ordinance, a resident on Cornell who's going to be subject to a reimbursement district ordinance had some very specific requests. So both of those residents gave us the opportunity to assess these ordinances to see where changes might be appropriate. So as we've looked through, we've found 8 areas or 8 recommendations for changes. All 8 of those apply to the reimbursement district ordinance. 4 of those same requests also apply to the LID, as Nora mentioned. So I thought we'd walk through those very quickly. We talked a little bit about the history here. The LID ordinance has worked very well for, 19, 20 years. And the reimbursement district ordinance for 6 years, but the opportunity to enact those has given us this opportunity to look at where improvements could be made. Next slide. So the 3 areas that we're looking at, we want to establish better alignment between the 2 programs, an opportunity to just update costs and establish a method so that those costs don't get stale. And then third, there are just some things that we can incorporate to help streamline the program administration. So the first one, and this is probably the most technical of them, and they get easier after this, but in the reimbursement district ordinance, one of the definitions is about oversizing. And oversizing really applies in 2 different areas. One is oversizing of sanitary sewers when we really fund that through SDCs rather through reimbursement district charges. The second area that oversizing applies to is when a developer, and if you recall reimbursement district ordinance, there can be both private reimbursement district ordinances which apply to developers who build infrastructure that benefits someone else, as well as district-initiated reimbursement districts. So the oversizing as it pertains to development reimbursement districts is when that developer builds something that is larger than just his or her development, and they are eligible to recover some of those costs. So this is an attempt to differentiate between those 2 where it would not apply for district-initiated RDs, but it would still for private reimbursement district ordinances. The second recommendation is really, this is one of these program administration improvements. Right now, the ordinance requires publication, a very long publication of 7 different areas, resulting in a multiple inches, maybe foot-long advertisement in a journal of local circulation. We still want to make the owners who are impacted by the reimbursement district very aware of these. So we would still send all of that information to any of the property owners who are directly impacted. However, we're asking that the published notification just refer to the location and the action being taken, and all that information would be available to them online. So it's just streamlining that aspect. The third one is providing flexibility for the board to make modifications. So this is the one that came up both with Moss Street and Cornell, where the owners had two very different requests, and trying to anticipate every request that may come up is going to be difficult. So what we'd like to do is provide some language giving some flexibility that we can incorporate into the final resolutions and orders that could affect the charges and how they would be administered. The fourth change, and this is what initially drove this, is being able to incorporate the early connection incentives that are present in the local improvement district and being able to wrap those into the reimbursement districts. When we went out and talked with the residents on the reimbursement districts, and they found out that, gee, if I voted for an LID, I'd be eligible for these early connection incentives, it caused confusion with the programs. So these would align the two programs. The fifth recommendation aligns timeframes on connection incentives. Right now, in the local improvement district, there is a 6-month time frame in which owners can connect and be eligible for private plumbing financing. In the other early connection incentive has a 1-year time period in which owners must connect in order to be eligible for a cost reduction. So again, just to help simplify it and avoid confusion with the owners, if we can align those two dates at a 1-year time frame. We'd like to increase the maximum funding allowable for the private plumbing charges. The RD ordinance enacted in 2014 has a $5,000 threshold. The LID enacted in 2001 has a $2,000 threshold. The costs that we're seeing now often approach $10,000. So this change will apply to both of those, upping them and making them similar or the same at $10,000. The other thing that we'd like to do is tie that to a cost index so that that amount doesn't get stale, but it changes with a construction cost index.
So these are the costs that a private property owner is going to incur to decommission their septic tank, install their lateral, perhaps do some additional plumbing interior to oftentimes the septic systems are in the backyard, the sewer is in the front yard, so they have to do some work. That's the intent of allowing owners to be able to access financing for those improvements.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, the seventh recommendation.
Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, thank you. The seventh recommendation, again, is just streamlining administration. When an owner comes in to apply for their permit, we find that they have to end up signing 3 different financing agreements. One for their reimbursement district charge, one for their private plumbing reimbursement charge, and then one for their permit fees. And then in addition to that, there are some other permit fees that are not eligible for financing. So they have a check and 3 different financing agreements to enter into. So this would enable us to wrap all those into one and enable them to sign one financing agreement. Then the last one is the RD ordinance does not specifically address apportionment, and this is really reapportionment when a charge is placed upon a property and that property is partitioned in the future or subdivided. The LID ordinance gives some good guidance on how that reapportionment is to happen. The reimbursement district ordinance does not include any of that language, so we'd like to include that language for clarification purposes. So those are the 8 recommended changes. The 4 of those that apply to the LIDs are the financing for private plumbing, the or the timeframe associated with that, bumping that out to a year, the change in the dollar figure to $10,000, providing the flexibility, and the combining of the financing. So those are our requested modifications. We just want to seek the board's either approval or comments on those before we start redrafting the language. And then we can talk about next steps. So I'll just open it up for any questions about that first.
I don't see any questions in the room. How about you, Commissioner Schouten?
I think those are all good, common sense changes and revisions, and I don't have any trouble with them. And I applaud our ongoing tweaking in a positive direction on a good program that had a few problems with it. So I'm good with it. Thank you.
I do have one quick question. Some of these are really administrative, a lot of them are. Is it now flexible enough that it's going to have some test of time so you're not back in saying, well, we've got these other situations? Do you think there's enough flexibility that this administratively can be done?
I mean, these two ordinances have been very stable, and this is really just providing those flexibility pieces where we've run into problems. So I think aligning them will make it a lot easier for people who are impacted by them to understand, and then it gives us flexibility so that we're not locked in as tightly as we currently are. The situations that arose this year were new, after 16 years or whatever it's been. So this, now with the flexibility, we can't foresee everything, but it'll allow us an additional flexibility. Indexing the dollars addresses the issue of the cost of construction and not having those numbers go stale. So I think those are two of the big issues that will give us additional flexibility.
I really applaud the customer orientation for these changes. You've learned from the way the program has been operating. You've helped us navigate these cases in most recent time, and these look like really important improvements so that we can continue to service our customer base in a very well-ordered way that provides for clarity and certainty for all.
Okay, thank you. So the next steps coming up, as Nora mentioned, we did get direction from you to rewrite the reimbursement district ordinance. We did not ask for the LID at that same time. So we'll come back to the next meeting, July 7th, and ask for that direction. Our intent is to hit July 21st. We are still in the midst of rewriting the ordinances, and we have some internal review process to go through. But we'll hit July 21st, perhaps later than that. And then in August, we would have a second reading of the ordinance in the public hearing that's necessary to modify an ordinance.
Could I ask, I'm really questioning if we need to take that step on July 7th, because you've highlighted the need for the revisions here. That's for the LID ordinance, correct?
That is correct.
It's my understanding that by district rule, in order to modify an ordinance, you need to provide us direction. I'll leave it to Jerry to opine as to whether that direction needs to be by minute order or can be direction that you give us here, although this is a work session, so I'm not sure all how it
I
works.
interpreted this to be work session, and you explained both the changes for the reimbursement district and for the LID, and so I'm questioning, so really what's going to be different between what we just went through today versus what we would go through on July 7th?
Probably nothing. It is simply part of the ordinance process to get direction to move forward so that people aren't out doing ordinances without direction. So it's simply part of the ordinance process.
Does that have to occur in a board meeting?
This is a work session that it's referring to, right?
No.
No.
Oh,
This is a
July,
work session.
July 7th would be a minute order on consent.
Oh, that's my mistake.
Sorry.
Okay, I wasn't being clear in how I posited that. So I'm on the same page then.
Okay, great.
Okay, terrific.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We have one more item on the agenda. It's an executive session, and I think we should probably take a break beforehand. So 10-minute break, will that work for you as well, Commissioner Schouten?
Yes, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay, so we will reconvene at 3:51. Thank you.
Huh.